We need to be good at sussing out.
You can do it from any point.
Let's collaborate instead of compete.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. John Abbas here, and man, do I have a special guest for you today who has truly one of the most incredible stories that I've ever heard. Before I bring her on, if this is your first time here, I want to welcome you and say thanks so much for being here and tuning in. If you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, I just want to make sure that you get a notification every time I release a new episode. And if you've been here before, I just want to welcome you back. And I also want to say thank you for being here. It's because of you that I'm here 3 years later interviewing incredible people and getting them to share their just amazing stories. So with that being said, friends, today we have a very special episode. My guest, Megan Reuwer, is the truest definition of success that I've ever seen. And I want you to imagine for a moment how difficult it would be to raise a child with a disability while being a successful entrepreneur. Now, I want you to imagine you had 5 children and one of them didn't make it, and all of the other 4 have a serious disability. Megan Reuwer is a rock star. 2 of her children have spina bifida. 2 of her children have a serious heart defect. And despite this, she is able to care for all of them while building a successful company nationwide. Her story was so inspirational that I couldn't help but to reflect and sit in gratitude the entire day after we finished that episode. I even spoke to my wife about it. It was just one of those interviews that really impacted me, and I know that it will for you as well. And, you know, the lesson that I took from it is no matter how bad you think you have it, somebody has it worse and they are still thriving and have an unbelievable mindset. And so I hope this interview moved you the way that it did me, and I'm excited for you to listen to it. Enjoy. Megan, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on. I'm excited for you to get everybody fired up, man, today. I love your story, and so I'm excited for you to share it today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Okay. Do you want me to start, or do you want to go?
No, I'll start. Okay. So for those of you guys listening, Megan is a successful entrepreneur, but what really makes her incredible is her story. And I wanted to have you on, Megan, because I think your story will give a lot of the listeners a ton of perspective. But more importantly, I just want to hear how you were able to thrive despite some incredible challenges. And so my hope is through your story and through this interview that everybody listening will walk away from this interview with a tremendous amount of gratitude, a lot better perspective on their own lives and situations, and just a different outlook in general. So I want to start, if you could just share with everybody a little bit about yourself and your story.
Great. Yes, I am Megan Reuwer, and as John said, I'm a successful entrepreneur. I'd say I always fell into it. I'm a mama of 4, 4 living, 5, but 4 living, and 3 of our children, 2 are special needs, and 1 is what they call medically complex because she doesn't actually have a full understandable diagnosis. So we kind of started the journey of parentinghood and just were ready for what came. We definitely didn't expect what came to come. So 2 of our kids have spina bifida, which is a neural tube birth defect. So it is very common, actually. It's one of the most common. And it impacts everything from your bowels to your bladder to your spine, brain development. It's a whole wide range. And so our son Phoenix is 13 and he is paralyzed from the waist down. And then our daughter Genevieve is 9 and she has movement. So we have 2 wheelchairs in our house. We have, I think it's a combined 22 specialists between our 3 kids, and PT, OT, all the things. So yeah, I mean, I think when our son Phoenix was diagnosed, I think I was 15 weeks pregnant. My husband was going to the military and our OB loved us. So we were like, hey, can you sneak a peek? And he said, I think he has spina bifida. So we were like, okay. We lost our first son 2 and a spina bifida, but it's fatal. And so our perspective at that point really shifted from life is such a gift. Because if anyone you love, you lose them. It's just something that is a perspective shifter, as you said. So
Yep.
with that being our first journey, we always say Evan, our first son, shaped us for parenting, that come what may, we're all in, and
Right.
we'll value who they are. So our oldest is 15 and he's typically developing healthy. And then from there, it was just a wild ride. So
Wow. So is spina bifida, is it genetic? Like, do they
no.
know? They don't know. Like,
So, I mean, it's quite possible that it's genetics, but genetics, they really understand such limited. And even in the 15 years I've been a mom, it's expanded, but there's nothing genetically that shows up in any of us. We've had all the testing. They consistently do it because new data is coming out. But basically, what it is like in the beginning of a pregnancy, it's a tube that closes. I think, think of a macaroni tube. It closes on the top and the bottom, and that's the brain and the bottom of the spine. So, for women who everyone has a chance of this, it's like a 1 in 5,000 risk. But it goes up higher with children, which the data is just, it's so wide range that it is really not that well researched or backed medically, funding wise. So they haven't come a long way. The one thing that they do understand is women who are prone to have spina bifida kids, it's usually an inability to break down folic acid. So the body's not getting everything it needs to help the baby grow in those first, and that happens in the first 21 days of pregnancy. So you don't even know you're pregnant yet. So yeah, that's kind of, and I am definitely in the medical world kind of a mind bomb, like what the heck?
yeah.
Also, we always said, like, if we knew, we would, I don't know. People always asked us, if you had known, would you have kept going? And I'm like, it's so hard to look back because I love each one of them and can't imagine our family without one of them. But I also am like, yeah, if someone laid out, hey, this is what your world's going to look like, I might be like, oh, two's good.
Yeah. So I want to just talk a little bit about your world, especially early on, because I read also, is it true 2 of your children have heart defects as well?
Yes. Yep. So both of our daughters, so Genevieve is the 9-year-old who has spina bifida. She also has hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And then Penelope, our medically complex one, was born with a heart defect that they repair, and it's called tetralogy of flow. And they don't, those kids generally need some sort of other organ or heart transplant way later in life.
Yep.
But generally it shouldn't impact their quality of life overall. But she has some other, she just was born with some other things that they didn't catch until emergency surgery. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's been a wild
I'm
ride.
interested, just for a couple of minutes, I'd love to hear a little bit about like your kids. Like, what are their personalities, like their outlooks, like how do they view their situation? And like, do they even know? Do they like, I mean, I always want to know that.
Yeah, it's great. And I love educating on that because I think we've come so far as a culture in really embracing every type of child, person, human. And I love that. I mean, I remember when Phoenix was little, people would see him in a wheelchair and they'd shout at him. And I'd be like, he can hear. And it was just that old school, like, I don't know, the barrier feels so big that people don't even realize how awkward they are interacting. And we have seen that change so much in the years. Just in the last 5 years, I would say the awareness and the way that even children feel more comfortable with my children has been so helpful to their psyches. So yes, you have 3 daughters. Every single personality is very different. Our oldest is very driven, very big brother, so compassionate, wants to help us parent. We're like, we got this, be a kid. Phoenix, our 13-year-old, we say, he's always been so joyful, loves people. Like, we always say he might be a stalker at some point in life because when he's obsessed with you, he's obsessed with you. And in the best way. Yes, in the best way, but he's hitting that teenage age where you're like, okay, some things like call once a day, not 17 times. So he's learning, and he's definitely on the spectrum as well. So some things don't compute the same.
Yep.
And when he was younger, he was very emotionally, he is a deep feeler for sure. He's one of, I mean, all our kids are, but he could really feel when someone felt awkward with him. And because he loves people, that was definitely one of the first times we had to just open the door to conversations and say, okay,
Got it.
when you're in that situation, when someone's staring too long or acting awkward, you have the permission to say, hi, I'm Phoenix. Like, we just kind of tried to teach them little social skills
Yep.
to break through that awkwardness. So him and Genevieve together would be in an elevator at the children's hospital, and someone would stare a little too long, and Genevieve would be like, hey, I'm Genevieve, did you have a question? Like,
I
and
love that.
she looks like she's 3, but she's 9. So she's tiny. So people are always like, and she's so articulate that she's our fireball. She's our youngest, typical youngest personality. Like, I'll get what I want, how I want it. And you're like, okay, slow your roll. Super creative. So is my other daughter. Penelope is more quiet, creative, introverted, deep thinking. So yeah, that's
Wow.
kind of, but we've just tried to always allow them space to feel what they feel, to recognize what's going on there. Like, are you feeling like you don't fit? Are you feeling different? Are you, Genevieve specifically, she's so driven and she can feel left out a lot. So we have a lot of
Right.
conversations around, okay, well, we can help people make you feel included. And what does that look like? And she can crawl. So once kids get used to that, even with her
Yep.
age, they're pretty accepting of like, oh, come down on her level. She's definitely our problem solver and definitely not afraid to ask for what she wants. So, but yes, just giving them permission to not have to feel awkward about what their bodies are and what their differences are, but to feel confident that this is the way they are and they get to exist in this world on so many of the same levels that we do. It's just breaking through those walls of fear for others or just limitations. Because I think for so long, special needs kids were hidden, and now they're so much more visible, and we're making so much inclusivity a really important part of our society.
Absolutely. And they're going on to do great things. I mean, like
Amazing.
it's incredible. And, whether they know it early on or not, they're able to reach so many more people and inspire them than somebody who may not have went through that. So their footprint, can ultimately become bigger. I feel like the entire episode could be a lesson on just incredible parenting, but we'll sprinkle in some other things. So your husband was military. Like, did he come home throughout all of this? Is he still military? Like, what's kind of
so he's retired military. He was only in for almost 4 years. And then so he got injured in the military, and not like anything horrific, and was able to get a, what is it called? Medical
Honorable
discharge.
Oh,
Thank you.
discharge.
Like honorable medical discharge, which was a relief to us because we were in the midst of surgeries and it was so hard for him. He was in the National Guard. He was full-time Army and then National Guard. And it was just really hard for him to be away on the weekends and things like that when they were all so young. So we felt relieved. We feel like the military was such a gift to our family. Phoenix was born while we were in the military. And so the medical bills, like the medical care was phenomenal. So it was really, it's what's incredible about that story, and is kind of the truth of our life, is my husband was like, I need a career transition. He was a manager at Starbucks. He loved it until he didn't. And he's like, I just need to figure out, and he wanted to do nursing or x-ray tech. And at that point, the military was offering a sign-on bonus. And he's like, I'm going to go try and see. And so he got his education as a military tech through them. He actually got his bachelor's through, because he's always dreamed of doing PA school, and then just life, So yeah, we were in it in San Antonio full time for 2 years of it, and then moved back we were living in Wisconsin at that point. So moved back to Wisconsin. And yeah, we feel really grateful for that season in the military. And like anything, it shapes your perspective of the sacrifice it really entails for families to choose that life and serve us in that way. It's just, I was like, I'm not a military wife. I can do this for a short period of time, but this is not lifelong for me. And he's like, yeah, me neither. So
Absolutely. So I have a question that I think a lot of people are going to want to ask, which is, your children have been through a lot of different surgeries, procedures, and, I know even with my daughter, when she gets sick with anything or that I have to take her to the hospital, the thoughts going through my mind, like the praying, I'm like, oh my God, I hope it's not serious. Like, how do you mentally prepare yourself to deal with, like, when you're going in for a surgery, that what happens if it doesn't go as expected or if it's bad? Like, how are you able to mentally deal with that? Like, is there anything that you do? Is there something that you tell yourself, something that you read, something that you listen to? Like, just what do you do?
yeah, such a great question. It's evolved over the years. As you learn yourself, you learn what you need to prep and prepare, right? So, we definitely grieve the night before every surgery. Mike is my best friend. We've been through so much life together, and we were best friends for years before we got together. And so, we will really talk about our fears and our doubts and have a good cry usually. And then we know the waiting. So any surgery, any long procedure it's very difficult. Your mind goes anxiety and crazy, no matter how many times we've done it. It's the great news is we're a yin and yang. So when I'm like, he's like, it's okay. Go outside and get some fresh air. Go ground yourself. Go get a cup of coffee. So we've actually learned any surgery longer than 4 minutes or 4 hours, not 4 minutes, we get out of the hospital, because the environment and energy of the hospital, especially, like, we're seasoned at this, but some of those parents are so brand new and it's so overwhelming. And I am a total empath. So I'll feel that anxiety. And I've learned all this about myself. So in the beginning, for me, it was a lot of my spirituality that helped anchor me. Just a lot of praying, a lot of memorizing mantras or scriptures that really supported me. Now it's more, okay, I understand what emotion's coming up within me, and I don't need to shove it. I don't need to push it aside. I need to just sit with it and be like, okay, I'm afraid, and fear is okay. If I shove that turns into anxiety. So I don't want to be anxious. I want to just let it pass. And it always passes. That's the truth of anything hard. But yeah, we clear a lot of space for grief in our life, and just saying, what if, there's this TV couple who always did it. Let's say all the worst. And when Mike and I were watching that on the whatever show it was, I'm forgetting right now, we're like, we do that. That's so funny. But for both of us, that works. That may not work for everyone, but I find saying it out loud versus keeping it inside, there's such a release valve there that we need in every area. In business, it's like when you get all in your head and you're like, am I doing it right? Did I drop the ball on this? And then you talk to your peer who's an entrepreneur and you're like, oh no, I was just all up in here, right? We're good.
That's right.
So it's been a different process right now. Like for me, we do a lot of self-care. So I do meditation walks. We have a sauna. I take really good care of holding a lot of space, and I'm trying to, really teach my kids that you get to be your priority first, because with the level of care they'll have to do for their bodies long-term independently, they need to also know that it's not just about like having to have all of these medical demands. It's about you also finding things that you feel grounded and connected to yourself in, and God, or whatever, your spirituality is. So modeling it, because I was not taught that on any level. It took me years. So.
Yeah, me either. It's funny because mental health is like a big topic right now. And I think a lot of it is because so many people just aren't equipped to deal with problems mentally. It's just, it's not like 3-4 generations ago where like death was every day or every week or every month. And it was very common for 50% of your kids not to make it past, 18 or 19. And so it's just, but today looking back, it's like, wow, like how do they actually get through that? How do they deal with it? And so it's just always been so interesting, to me. So I want to kind of get into, cause it's one thing to know what you do to deal with it mentally. But there's a whole other aspect of it, which is physically. I can't imagine what your routine looks like or what a typical week or a month. Can you just like give everybody like kind of a
Snapshot.
snapshot of like maybe early on or maybe now, like what does a typical week or 2 weeks look for you in terms of just caring for your family?
That's a great one. So it is more rhythmic now than it ever was as they're getting older and more independent. And we're really focusing hard on, there's a lot of surgeries that are not necessary. So their bowels require a regimen, like an enema every day. So that's a whole process that eventually they would take full ownership over. So
Got it.
that's part of our day every day. That's our routine for each kid, as well as my daughter is cathed. So she holds all her pee. Her body doesn't naturally release it. So every
Mhm.
3 hours, we have to straight cath her to release that, which means both of them are still in diapers. So we have a 13 and
Yep.
9-year-old in diapers. So we're still diapering. Um, as far as their specialists go, in the beginning, when I had Phoenix, it was 40 hours a week of specialist appointments for that first year. So it was a full time job. I remember feeling so overwhelmed. And one of my best friends, who was a special ed teacher, said to me, Megan, in the special ed world, you just went from 1 kid to 4 kids because we count one special needs child as the responsibilities of 3 in a classroom. And
Ooh.
I remember feeling so relieved, like, oh, I can do this. I was such a young mom. I was like 26, and I just was like, oh, okay. I had one experience of a typically developing healthy child, and that felt like a lot. So this child with all these voices, and I was new. So there's this doctor has this opinion, and this specialist wants you to be doing this activity at home. And so he had PT and OT, so physical therapy and occupational therapy. I think it was 10 hours a week. Yeah, it was 2 hours, 5 days a week. So then there were the specialists inserted in those days. And we were at 3 hospitals because we used 2 military hospitals plus the children's hospital. So that was one of the most overwhelming years of my life. But I really learned. I learned a lot about myself that year. I started running. I started sewing. I need creative outlets. So I really cleared the space, reading all the books to continue to you can just, special needs parents can really come under the pressure of the demands and the needs. They're so high that
That's right.
we can, and that is exactly to your point. There's so much mental health then that comes into play. And there's so much depression, and there's just not enough space if you're not connecting with yourself. It's just a really, really difficult journey. And so we learned early on, like, that's a priority for us. And we've had date night every Thursday night for our friends make fun of us. Thursday nights are off the table with the Reuwars.
That's
Because it's their
awesome.
night. Yeah, it's really important. We always say, like, we wouldn't survive without those, because sometimes they're fighting, sometimes they're just hanging out, sometimes they're processing, sometimes they're dreaming, but we really need that time in our life that's just separate from being parents. So yeah, now it's a little bit less intensive as they've gotten older. Like, they go to their specialist. We probably on a monthly scale have 6 appointments. And that's for all 3 of them. Sometimes there's a big test. That's an all day thing. So yeah, that's kind of, we haven't had any major surgeries. We had a 6-year stretch where my son was having tons of spinal surgeries in Boston. So we were flying from Wisconsin to Boston, and some of them were very emergent. So that was intense. And so it's ebbed and flow. We kind of feel like we're in a we can breathe season. I mean, there's surgeries on the docket, but we're just pausing right now to just give them a little bit of a normal life, because that's always the balance too, is they've only known this as their normal, but
That's
as
right.
they get older, they have opinions about it that we want to honor and
Yeah,
help
I know.
them.
I know that you're spiritual, and I wanted to ask, like, did you ever have a period of time where like you were just like, why me? Like, where you felt like it was just one thing after another, and like, did you ever go through that, or did you bounce back
Yeah,
quickly?
that's such a common question that I get all the time. And I think I would have in the past said no. I've never been like, why God, why?
Yep.
Why did you choose me? But I would say, as I look back on my life, there was a lot of it we were surviving that I didn't even have the room to go there. Because for
Mm,
me,
yep.
if I went there, it was going to take a lot of energy and space to trust that I had what it took. And I needed to be able to lean into having what it took. So I think now in my 40s, I'm more like, holy, how? Why? But not in a way that I would change anything, because I
Yep.
love who I've become through it. I love the people I've met through this journey and got to lead and encourage and mentor. And I love who my kids are. So it's more of a
Absolutely.
like, reflective, like, how
Yeah.
did you think this was a good idea? Uh,
Yep. Yeah. Well,
so,
I want to add to that because like me and my wife, we grew up in pretty poor families and we went on and we've become fairly successful and we've done really well and it's just we look back and like in your situation, your family is so close, right? And you
mhm,
communicate all the time. And we hit this point in our lives maybe a couple years ago where, we started to make a lot of money and we're like, wow, we can get a bigger house and do that. But, we'll go on date nights and then Kat will just reflect on how, her father was from the Philippines. He came over and there's like 9 of them living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And those were her favorite memories in the world, how close they were when they had nothing, when it was just like, and so we start thinking about, wow, like we're building this life of what we think success is, but really at the end of the day, success to us ultimately is family and how close we can be. And, we look back and we're like, maybe it's not that bad to live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 9 members of your family where they played cards all day, play during the day, they communicate, they have barbecues together. Holidays now, we're trying to reel our family in, like, hey, can you fly in? Can you come travel? And it's just like all this work. And
yeah,
so I just think that's really huge. So just like how close you guys are, and that's admirable. So I want to pivot a little bit into how you became a successful entrepreneur despite your crazy schedule and the needs and the demands. And so, can you kind of share a little bit about your entrepreneurial story and how that happened?
yes, sure. So, when we had our first son, I was in a salon and I decided to leave the salon and go home, and figure out my journey with hair was kind of a wild ride anyway. I had a good friend who was in college and she said, "Hey, would you come to the dorm?" And it was like a big beehive dorm. And I'll recruit my whole floor to just come in the bathroom. You can do their hair, you can whip out foils and cuts. I charged them super cheap. This is how I paid for my wedding. I would be there from like 6 p.m. till 3 in the morning and walk out with like, oh, here's the down payment for our tent. So
That's
I've always been a very outside the box creative thinker. I loved hair because it was basically, I always wanted to be a therapist. And it was basically like, I don't want to do 8 years of school. So I'll do hair. I can be creative and listen to people and encourage people. So I've always loved people, and it was annoying to me as a child. I wasn't great at sports. I wasn't a great book student. I love learning.
right.
But the structure of school did not fit how I'm wired. I'm very ADHD. I'm very like, wait, what? Huh? Keep my interest. So
Me too.
yeah. So cosmetology was a great fit for me. And when I decided to go home, most of my clients found me. We lived in a smaller town and it built really fast and really well. And then what happened was I started to get moms groups because I had a little kid, and the moms groups, I was like, hey, what if I brought all my hair stuff? They were mostly my clients. And a lot of them didn't, those are the years when husbands are working a lot because you're building that long term career. Like, what if I bring all my hair stuff? We babysit each other's kids and I'll knock out hair. So I really learned to make it fit my life and my goals instead of like building a life around a business. I built my life and then my business. So
That's awesome.
because of that, that led me to tons of relationships that then ended up kind of leading me to, we had to be a super green and clean family. We couldn't use any chemicals. So I got introduced to a chemical free way of cleaning. I fell in love, wanted to educate everyone on it. And that's where I got into the MLM direct sales world and was able to, I just really loved what I was doing. And as I thought it was about the product, but it was really about, and we talked a little bit about this, but the personal growth that was there and the opportunity to really see women reach their full potential and growth and dreams and fit it into, again, building their life and then the business into it. So
Yeah.
from there, I would say there were a lot of stressful years. My husband, at one point when it was first starting to really grow, I felt frantic because I'm changing diapers while Facebook messaging people, and my husband's like, are you a mom right now or are you working? I'm like, well, I'm both. So we finally got to a point where he was like, I'm going to stay home and you're going to go hard for this for 1 year and we're going to see what happens. And that year was a turning point for us. It was like, okay,
Wow.
this is it. This is what we're doing. We're building this business as a family. And it's going to get our attention. So
Yeah. And
that's
just to chime in, I tell people, I'm the first to admit this all the time, that I have an unbelievable amount of love for network marketing and direct sales. And I tell everybody this, whether you make it a career or not, it literally makes no difference. But everything I learned about being a public speaking,
yes.
closing, just problem solving, dealing with rejection, overcoming limiting beliefs, and just more than anything, the personal growth that you go through and listen to. I mean, I would listen to audios, Jim Rohn every single day, all day, Zig Ziglar. I mean, that reprograms you like into somebody completely different. And I know people that have gone on to build huge companies that all got their start there. And it's just, so I have a ton of love for that. And it's such a great place to start, especially, somebody like you, it was in your situation where chaos is everywhere and it's the perfect business for that.
Yes.
I really do believe that.
Totally. It really fit our life and allowed us, you can tell from just our time together that my priority will always be my family. And, and a lot of that comes from a space of like, we don't know how many years we get with them. So these are I'm not going to miss. And it's not a fear space. It's just a space of awareness and intentionality. That is like, I will never choose a career, but I love working. Listen, I love mentoring women. I love problem solving. I love creating. So to lay that down wasn't a reality for me. That was like, I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I've always been here in my home, but I needed another space. And so that was the best fit for our family. And then that led me to coaching because I had mentored thousands of women there. And that led me to a coaching career. And so now I'm kind of in both worlds, health and wellness and life coaching. And that's kind of to your question of like how, that's where I really, when I learned what my values were and how to align my life with my values, I think I always knew them, but they were very vague, like family, faith, friendship. When I really honed in, oh no, they're collaboration, communication, and connection. And if those three things don't exist in at least 2 out of 3 of those, why I love podcasting, then I'm saying no. And when I was able to just stake my road so much more narrow, then a lot of the stress fell off and I was able to create. And even building a business, as you know, it's micro moments. Like, it's like, okay, I have 10 minutes to read this self-development book. That's all I have right now. Really what I want to do is like scroll, but I'm going to take those 10 minutes. And so I was able to just build on that in business. I have 20 minutes of nap time to knock out this follow-up. I'm going to do that. And so that's just kind of how it became successful, was those little moments of consistency and choices. We always say the little big things that built into the big platform.
Got it. I love it. So what's next for you? Like, what's like your vision, your ultimate like goal?
It's big.
I want to hear it.
We would love to write. Both my husband and I really love writing. We'd love to do a podcast. That's in the goals. Soon, hopefully sooner than later. And we would definitely love to share like this opportunity of sharing our family story and connecting not just the special needs parents, but with parents and entrepreneurs. We just both my husband and I love connection. We've always been kind of supporters of the leaders, like leaders of whatever, churches, leaders of businesses. We're so
Yep.
interconnected with multiple entrepreneurs. And that support, because I really believe that's the gift of living through so much adversity, is your perspective shifts to, and there's just so much wisdom that comes from adversity in a
Yeah.
but there's just a depth of wisdom of like, yeah, but this will pass and this is not it forever. And how can we create bigger? And so, yes, we have big goals, but, often we often get to this point where we're like, is it the timing yet though?
Yep.
And
Yep.
I have some great curriculum I've written for, I love writing curriculum and because I love making things a system. So anyway, I have some coaching things that I'd like to launch. It's just always figuring out, is this me dreaming right this second or is this launch time? So
Yep. No, I totally get it. Well, just from speaking with you, this is the first time me and you've ever spoke. I would definitely say you could kill it in the niche of parenting and not
mhm,
and with all parenting, because I feel like many parents that I know, they have one way of communicating with their kids, and it's just either discipline or cheering them on like at a sporting
mhm,
event. But like some of the things that you shared earlier really hit me hard, just
mhm,
communicating feelings and like how to think through things. And I think so many parents lack that, the ability or just the know how to talk to their children about these things. My daughter will come home and say, well, this person was mean to me, and my wife will give her a little coaching, but to actually talk through those feelings, I think would be really, really, really valuable. So
oh, thanks. That's great. I love that. Yeah, we love talking about marriage and um, you know, marriage and parenting because it takes a lot of intentionality. And again, it
right.
takes a lot of personal reflection and self growth. Because if I can't acknowledge and validate my feelings, how do I teach my children that?
Yep. Yep.
And I mean, just from what you shared of your childhood, I had similar experiences. It was push through. It was pull up by the bootstraps, get through it, keep going. Don't give in, and so I think for me, the journey, I live with mental illness, so the journey for me has always been, but whatever's happening, there's room for me to sit with it and room for me to acknowledge it and understand it, because if I don't, it's worse. It's a bigger storm, right? And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, we've done a lot of work and continue to. I mean, there's so much resource now. So I love that idea. And I think I'll go tell my husband, like, that's where we start, which that would
Yeah.
be our goal, is to start with our story and just what we've learned and how.
Absolutely. There was and I tell you, parenting, it's such a big thing. So there was this guy who's like maybe in his mid 40s, and you could probably look him up on YouTube, but he created like 4 or 5 YouTube videos, and the title of his YouTube channel was Dad, How Do I? And he
I
was
love
just
it.
basically showing he recorded him, I believe, for his daughter, and it was just like how to or and his son, like how to tie a tie. And then Dad,
Mm,
how do I, it was like little handyman, like how do I hang a picture?
I
And it went
love it.
viral. I mean, millions and millions and millions of views. And his YouTube channel literally went from 0 to like 2 million subscribers. And all these news channels had him on. I think Ellen had him on. And it was just like, that's the need, I think, for like
Hmm.
parent kid communication.
Yeah,
And
it's
there's just
great.
the demand is there. So my final question for you is just, you know, for all the listeners, for anyone listening or anybody in the future listening, that they're going through something with like their child or a tough time, whether it's a sickness or a phase or just anything, like what advice would you give that parent who's maybe freaking out or barely holding it together,
Mhm.
or like just not like nowhere to turn? Like what would you say to them that might just give them a little bit of encouragement?
Um, I mean, I would say find someone you can talk to that is gonna hold space for you. That'd be my first thing. But the other big thing is lean in, like lean into love and let go of control. I think so often in parenting, it's our own expectations and our own need for it to look a certain way or control it that ends up
Mm,
causing some of that really deep pain for us. because we feel disappointed. And so, because it doesn't look the way we thought, right? I had to let go of so many of those things from day one. So I can see it clearly in a lot of my friends when they struggle. But leaning into love for me is always, it helps me let go of what I want it to look like and just be present for what it is. And that can be so hard when you're struggling with, mental illness or just a bad stage or, so we're very much about like finding the little ways to connect. So if that's a note in a lunchbox, if that's a, hey, want to go out to eat together, and no expectations, not like, I don't expect my 15-year-old to divulge his whole life with me. I want him to, but if that's not where that time goes, I am at peace with, and which is really hard for me because like I'm a deep, like, let's talk about all the deep things. So I'm okay with, we got time in together and it was intentional. So I think changing, but if you're really, really alone in it and it's really heavy, and I just think a support system is the only place I know that those breakthroughs or perspective shifts or support come for me. Cause sometimes I'm just a mess and I just need to be a mess. There's no answer,
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head for me when you said being like one of the big problems is people feeling like they're not in control. And I think that is it for a lot of people. It's the minute you realize that you're not in control, you panic. And then it's just understanding that it's okay and letting that part go that opens up a whole world. That was huge what you said right there. So Megan, this was amazing. You absolutely killed it. My final question is just, is there a place where people can follow you, a social media platform that's best, where you're posting things and like where's the best? Somebody wants to say, hi, this podcast moved me, I want to follow you moving forward. Where do they do that?
So I am on Instagram at Megan Reuwer. Or I also have my coaching page on there. meganrosecoaching.com is my website if you want that. I'm also on Facebook. And then we have a family page, which we're not great at updating, called We Are the Reuwers on Instagram. So we'll get back to that.
Yeah, I'll put all of that in the show notes.
Great.
Megan, this was incredible. Thank you so much for your time and for pouring into everybody today. You did an absolutely fantastic job. So thanks for being with us.
Truly an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.